This video focuses on the tariff war initiated by Trump. What this event reflects goes far beyond Trump's individual and arbitrary decision-making. Instead, it represents the external manifestation of a certain consensus between the elite class and the ordinary mega in the United States. Perhaps upon hearing this topic, many people will be filled with doubts and even suspect that they have misheard. I have always been opposed to China's so-called state capitalism approach of dumping goods globally. This behavior not only harms the interests of other countries, but also fails to truly benefit itself in the long run. Moreover, simply using productivity as a weapon will inevitably lead to resistance from other countries, which will try to take away this weapon. Therefore, from the perspective of safeguarding their own national interests, I can understand the actions of the United States and Europe in imposing tariffs on China. However, this does not prevent me from firmly supporting China's countermeasures. If China does not fight back, numerous small and medium-sized enterprises and low-income workers in China will be pushed to the brink of despair. Countering the tariffs may offer them a glimmer of hope. I would like to emphasize again that I do not approve of global dumping, which is a behavior that harms others without benefiting oneself. I am even more opposed to pushing other countries to a corner with no way out. We should never be like locusts that leave nothing but destruction in their wake. However, since the tariff war has already broken out, we must fight it to the end. Only in this way can the lower classes and small and medium-sized enterprises in China have a chance to survive and develop. I hope everyone can understand the profound meaning behind this. Nevertheless, this does not hinder my understanding of the underlying logic and practical needs of Trump's initiation of the tariff war. In fact, the tariff war is, to a large extent, a consensus among the majority of the American elite. As early as the beginning of last year, Jamie Dimon, a key figure on Wall Street and the CEO of Morgan Chase, clearly stated at the Davos Forum that imposing tariffs was a necessary measure. In addition to the financial elites on Wall Street, powerful union organizations with significant influence in swing states, such as the United Auto Workers and the United Steelworkers, also support the imposition of tariffs. The reason behind this is that almost all industries in the United States have been losing ground in the competition with China's inexpensive goods. The United States adheres to a free market economy, while China's economic model is often regarded by some as state capitalism. In this comparison, companies or industries within the free market economy system simply cannot compete with a huge monopoly trust and its subordinate branches and subsidiaries. In some cases, these branches don't even need to pay workers' salaries. An individual or an industry stands little chance of winning in a confrontation with such a system. If the free market economy wants to compete with China's state capitalism model in the manufacturing sector, it must meet the following 6 conditions: reducing workers' wages, extending working hours, ignoring environmental pollution, neglecting intellectual property rights, disrespecting private property rights, and not caring about profits in order to earn foreign exchange. But let's ask, which country can actually achieve all these? Even a country like South Korea finds it difficult to do so. Objectively speaking, state capitalism is much more advanced than the Qin-style system that focuses everything on war. It is not an exaggeration to call it the highest form of capitalism. Under this system, for some privileged groups, the Brahmins, even if their own country issues a large number of consumption vouchers, here referring to the Chinese yuan, they can only use them to buy ordinary goods. For truly high-quality products, they still need to use US dollars to purchase. During this process, the lower-class workers, the Dalits, have to work extremely hard, converting the value of their labor into consumption vouchers, while the products they produce are exchanged for US dollars. By suppressing the wages of lower-class workers and reducing their rest time, products manufactured at a low cost seem to be invincible in the market. At the same time, there are also some contradictions within Chinese society. Some members of the middle class, the Dalit Foreman, are facing challenges such as declining assets and an increased risk of unemployment, yet they still have an inflated sense of self-satisfaction. Currently, there are occasional incidents reflecting social contradictions in China. The previous approach of simply alleviating public grievances through anti-Japanese sentiment is no longer effective. At this moment, there is an urgent need for an external enemy to shift the focus of these contradictions, and Trump, to some extent, has played the role of such an enemy. In the United States, the situation is equally concerning. Over the years, wealth has been highly concentrated in the hands of a few. The scale of passive funds in the United States is approximately $1.3 trillion, and active funds are also around $1.3 trillion, with money market funds accounting for about $700 billion. The sum of these three is roughly equivalent to the scale of the US national debt. Even a single institution like Harvard University has assets as high as $70 billion. In terms of family assets, the value of stocks reaches the $1 trillion and deposits amount to $1.9 trillion. Statistics show that 10% of the wealthy in the United States control 87% of private wealth, while the lower class people represented by the rednecks only possess a tiny proportion of the total wealth in the United States. It is easy to imagine the resentment in their hearts. Nowadays, the internal opposition in the United States is becoming increasingly severe, especially the growing dissatisfaction of the lower class people towards the elite class. This has also laid the social foundation for Trump to become a popular figure and gain substantial support. The political system in the United States requires the support of the lower class people, but the interests of the elite class inevitably conflict with those of the lower class, and this contradiction is becoming more and more acute. In addition, the economic model of the United States has given rise to a group of middle classes in other countries. However, most of the wealth in these countries has flowed into the hands of Wall Street politicians and the upper middle classes of their own countries. These vested interest groups will never reveal the truth to the lower class people in the United States. So, how can this contradiction be resolved? The United States needs an external enemy, and China has become the suitable target. China's inexpensive goods are believed to have taken away American jobs and even plunged the United States into a debt crisis. Judging from the actual data, in 2024, the United States had a service trade surplus of $293 billion, but its goods trade deficit reached a staggering $1,294.1 billion. It is obvious that the hematopoietic function of the US economy is deteriorating. Any person who truly cares about the national interests would not tolerate their country being in a disadvantageous position of a long-term trade deficit. But the key question is, who is responsible for this situation? In the United States, the elite class has amassed a great deal of wealth, making the lives of the lower class people difficult. However, in order to prevent the lower class people from directing their grievances towards them and triggering a revolution, the elite class has been trying hard to make the rednecks believe that this difficult situation has nothing to do with the American elite, but is China's fault. As a result, tactics and propaganda methods, such as launching public opinion attacks on China and preaching that the trade deficit has led to the national debt issue, have become the inevitable choices of the American elite class. In the narrative system of the elite class, the tariff war is packaged as an effective means to combat the enemy, strive for benefits and job opportunities for the lower class people, and promote the return of manufacturing industries. For the lower class people, a series of measures taken by Trump, such as imposing tariffs and promoting the return of manufacturing, seem to be fulfilling his campaign promises, giving them hope for change. However, the costs behind the tariff war are something that Trump and the elites will never tell the rednecks. Now China has reduced its imports of American soybeans, chicken, beef, and pork, and has also returned Boeing aircraft. These consequences have almost nothing to do with the elite class because they do not rely on these agricultural products, and they travel by private jets. Regarding the imposition of tariffs, the relevant legislation in the United States was completed several years ago and was jointly promoted by both political parties. Therefore, in general, this is not Trump's personal will but a common consensus among political elites, real estate industry elites, and industrial workers. Some people may think that the tariff war may lead to inflation in the United States and harm the interests of ordinary Americans. But for unemployed industrial workers in areas like the Rust Belt, such as Vance's hometown, since they have already lost their jobs, what does inflation matter? From this perspective, the tariff war is indeed, to a certain extent, a consensus between the American elite and the lower class people. The Democratic Party has lost support in some aspects because its elites understand that imposing comprehensive tariffs on China may not necessarily lead to victory and may even bring them a bad reputation. This hesitant attitude has ultimately been exploited by the Republican Party and has become a powerful weapon to attack the Democratic Party. The victory of the Republican Party in the election has given Trump an illusion. He believes that the Democratic Party has accomplished nothing precisely because they have considered too many factors. Therefore, Trump decided to impose comprehensive tariffs on China, attempting to solve the so-called trade problem in one fell swoop. In the political landscape of the United States, capital has always dominated, with different capital groups taking turns to lead. Trump's series of measures undoubtedly represent the demands of a certain faction of capital, and many of these measures have also been recognized by this class. At the same time, Trump has also fully utilized the public support of ordinary people. My God, without the support of the people, he would not have dared to act in such a way. To some extent, the return to conservatism has become a consensus among the American elite and the ordinary people. However, Trump's current approach is too aggressive. His act of imposing tariffs on the whole world equates China with the rest of the world. This ruthless approach has seriously damaged the fundamental interests of the United States, especially the credibility and value system of the US dollar. The tariff war should be a strategic weapon, but Trump clearly has not correctly understood and utilized this weapon. It can be said that both the American elite and the ordinary people have the intention of dealing with China, which is a consensus. But Trump's current implementation methods are definitely not what the American elite class expects. In contrast, the more covert and moderate methods of Biden may be more in line with the strategies of the American elite. Trump's approach of pushing allies into the arms of the enemy has greatly dissatisfied the American elite. For ordinary American people, they may not care about the consequences of Trump's actions. Instead, they care more about the momentary feeling of pleasure and excitement. But this rough approach to the tariff war is entirely Trump's own willfulness. If the tariff war goes smoothly, it may be okay. However, once it encounters setbacks, his team is likely to experience internal strife. For China, Trump's approach has brought an unprecedented situation, which can be said to be a stroke of luck. In this situation, China should seize the opportunity to strengthen its own construction, especially to promote the reform of the distribution system and establish and improve the social security system. If some people still ignore the interests of the people, do not attach importance to the needs of the lower class people, and do not transform the national economy towards a consumption-oriented model, then China will face not only losses but even the risk of a disastrous defeat in the tariff war. Well, that's all for today's discussion on the tariff war initiated by Trump. Thank you all for your attention. See you next time.